So, so I think in the last class, towards the end of the class, probably you have missed some of the slides or some of the presentations. So I think you have heard about homeostasis. That you can, I think you have heard this. Then I have told you what are the factors that determine essentiality, and I have told you that there are four factors which determines the essentiality of an element. The first one is obviously the physicochemical property of the element, which makes it suitable for a for to be chosen by the biological system for its functioning. So first of all, the nature of the element, its physicochemical properties, which makes it suitable for the biological function, and only about 25 elements so far are known to be essential, though in our body you will get around 40, more than 40, around 41 to 42 elements if you analyze any standard human body, but out of these 25 elements are confirmed to be essential. Second thing is that we have discussed it in the last class in details, that essentiality depends on concentration of the element. Beyond a certain concentration, even essential elements can be toxic. So essentiality depends on the concentration. Up to a optimum concentration level, it is essential, but beyond a certain optimum level, it becomes, even essential elements become toxic. Third is that essentiality also depends on the oxidation state of an element. An element may be essential in a given oxidation state, but it may not be essential, even can be toxic in other essential states and other oxidation states. And two great examples are dioxygen and chlorine. Dioxygen is essential when it is in the O2, that is zero oxidation state, or 2 minus oxidation state in the form of oxide or water. But when it is in the peroxide or superoxide form, it is toxic. Similarly, chloride is essential, that is chlorine, when it is -1 oxidation state, it is essential, but when it is in the zero oxidation state, that is in the form of elemental chlorine, it is toxic. So essentially depends on the oxidation state. And finally, essentiality also depends on the state of evolution of the organism. I have told you that for the very early organisms, oxygen were toxic, but now we cannot live without oxygen. Similarly, for very early organisms, tungsten was one of the essential elements, but for modern elements, modern living systems, molybdenum is essential element. So essentiality also depends on the state of evolution. Maybe today we have 25 elements which are essential. Maybe in after several hundred years, some more essential, some more elements may be considered as essential. Then I have told you that essential elements, depending on their available concentration in the body, they may be classified under three headings. Bulk essential elements, which occur in gram quantity; trace essential element, which occurs in milligram to microgram quantity; and ultra trace element, which generally occurs in less than microgram, usually microgram to nanogram or even lower level. Now, in the bulk essential elements, we have several non-metals as well as metal ions. Among the non-metals, we have carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, chlorine, phosphorus. These are non-metal bulk essential elements. And among the bulk essential elements which are metals, we have two alkali metals and two alkaline earth metals. The sodium, potassium are the alkali metals, and calcium, magnesium are the alkaline earth metals, right? Similarly, for the trace elements, again, there may be non-metal as well as metal. Among the non-metals, we have fluorite, iodide, selenium, etc. And in the metal category, we have iron, copper, and zinc. All three are transition metals, or zinc, though strictly not transition metals, but sometimes it is treated along with the transition metals. Now, ultra trace elements all are usually metals, right? Because they are called, sometimes called micronutrients. They are required in microgram or even less quantity, and usually they are some metal ions like say manganese, cobalt, nickel, molybdenum, and non-metal one thing is there, bromide, right, or bromine. So this is the categorization of the essential elements based on their available concentration in our body. Now I have told you again that early life, for them there were 11 essential elements. For them only 11 elements were essential, whereas modern life has got 25 essential elements. For the early life, what are the essential elements? We have carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, chlorine. These are the non-metals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 non-metals, namely carbon, which was isolated from the atmospheric carbon dioxide and methane; hydrogen, which was obtained from the enormous amount of H2S that were prevalent in the early atmosphere; nitrogen was again obtained from the ammonia, which was there in the early atmosphere; sulfur was obtained from H2S and pyrites, again they were present in the early atmosphere; phosphorus and chlorine were isolated mainly from seawater, and it is believed by many persons, many scientists, that early life evolved on seawater, and that's why this phosphorus, chlorine, and along with say the metals like iron were isolated or were obtained inside the cells from the seawater. And there are also, so among the metals, which were the metals? Sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron. These are the 5 metals. So early life depended on 6 non-metals and 5 metals. Among the metals, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and one transition metal, that is iron. And among the non-metals, we have carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus. And I am repeating that modern life requires around 25 essential elements. Now, in this slide, what we have tried to demonstrate, please look at the slide very carefully. What we have tried to demonstrate in this slide is that according to the periodic table, according to the groups and periods, what is the distribution of the essential elements? Now you will find that some elements which are marked by blue circles, these blue circles, they indicate bulk essential elements. So those elements which are marked with blue circles, they are the bulk essential elements. So if you look at the group 1A, we have hydrogen. So we have so many elements in the group 1A. Among them, hydrogen is essential, sodium and potassium are essential, but other elements of group 1, group 1 are not essential. But though other elements of group 1 are not essential, but lithium, though it is not essential, but it has got medicinal application, particularly for treating nerve disease called manic disease. So for treating many diseases, some lithium salts like lithium chloride or lithium bromide are used. So lithium salts are used in medicinal purposes, but lithium is as such is not an essential element. Similarly, rubidium is not essential element, but some radioisotope of rubidium are used for radio diagnostic purposes. So among these group 1 elements, 3 are essential and 2 has got medicinal application, namely lithium for treatment of certain kind of nerve diseases and some certain radioactive rubidium isotopes for radio diagnostic purposes. Now, if we go to group 2, then again you have so many elements. Among these elements, magnesium and calcium, only these 2 elements are essential. Beryllium, in fact, is highly toxic towards the living system. Uh, but among the other group 2 elements, barium, it is not essential, but barium is used for some kinds of X-ray called barium mill X-ray, particularly for diagnosing certain ailments in your stomach, right? So barium is used for medicinal purposes, particularly for doing barium X-ray. Some barium salts are fed to the patient. And again, certain strontium isotopes are used for treatment and imaging of bone cancer, right? So again, strontium is not essential element, but certain radioisotope of strontium are used for actually imaging as well as treatment of bone cancer particularly. Then if we go to group 3, we have scandium, yttrium and lanthanum. None of them are essential. But again, some yttrium isotopes has got application. Some radioactive yttrium isotope has got application for as radio diagnostic agents, right? So none of them are as such essential. Now, if I go to group 4, then titanium, zirconium, hafnium, none of them are essential. None of them are required for the functioning of the body, but certain titanium compounds are being actively searched for and their anti-cancer activity. So titanium compounds are being investigated for their for their anti-cancer activity, and some titanium, that for certain medicinal implants, bone implants, right? This titanium and zirconium are sometimes used. Particularly, titanium is used in bone implants. So they have got certain medicinal application. Though group 3 and group 4 elements, none of them as such are essential or beneficial. Now, if we go to group 5, we have vanadium, niobium, tantalum. Only vanadium is essential. Niobium and tantalum do not have any essential or beneficial property, or neither have any medicinal property. Chromium, molybdenum, then group 6, chromium, molybdenum, and tungsten, all of them are essential. Chromium is essential for particularly for vertebrates or particularly for human being for glucose metabolism. Molybdenum again is a ultra trace essential element. Tungsten is also essential, but you must also know that molybdenum and tungsten are mutually exclusive. In the early living system, tungsten is essential, but with evolution, tungsten has been replaced by molybdenum. But you cannot find any living system where simultaneously molybdenum and tungsten are functioning as essential elements. So either in some living system, tungsten is present. In the archaic bacteria, the tungsten is present, but with the evolution, tungsten has been replaced by molybdenum. So all modern organisms contains molybdenum instead of tungsten. Then if you go to the group 7, we have manganese, technetium, rhenium. Manganese is essential, definitely essential, both for vertebrates as well as for plants. In plants, in photosynthesis, there is in the photosystem too, there is evolution of oxygen, and that evolution of oxygen is catalyzed by a tetranuclear manganese complex. So the oxygen in our atmosphere is actually generated by a tetranuclear manganese complex. So it is very much essential in the photo as part of the photosynthesis, and it is also very much essential for various enzymes in our body for vertebrates, right? Technetium, it is not essential. In fact, it is a trace element, or it is a, in fact it is nowadays it is not found in earth. It has to be synthesized by artificial methods. But technetium isotopes has got tremendous application in nuclear medicine, particularly for imaging of heart, imaging of brain, etc. So where most of the nursing homes, good nursing homes has got a nuclear medicine department, and they have a technetium reactor where technetium compound is produced, and that is used for actually imaging of heart tissues, imaging of brain tissues, etc. Right. Then if we go to group 8, iron, ruthenium, osmium, only iron is essential. Ruthenium, osmium are not essential, but some ruthenium compounds are being actively, or in fact, at very advanced stages of application as anti-cancer compounds, and they are gradually going to replace the platinum compounds, which are now being medicinally used for anti-cancer activity. So only iron is essential, and ruthenium has got tremendous medicinal application, prospective medicinal application in the cancer chemotherapy. Cobalt, rhodium, iridium. Here also only cobalt is essential. Rhodium, iridium are not essential. Nickel, palladium, platinum. Again, nickel only is essential. Palladium is not essential. Platinum is also not essential, but as I have told you that, or many of you know that there are some platinum compounds which are extensively used for treatment of cancer. So platinum compounds are integral part of cancer chemotherapy regimen. So platinum has got medicinal application. Then we have copper, silver, gold, and here we have copper, silver, gold. Only copper is essential. Silver and gold, they are not essential, but silver and gold compounds has got tremendous application uh, in medicine silver compounds, many of the silver compounds has got antibacterial or antimicrobial agent, and many of us in our home has got silver X ointment which contains certain silver compounds, and now nano silver compounds are being used for their strong antibacterial or antimicrobial properties. And gold compounds, gold 1 and gold 3, both gold has got two main oxidation state, gold 1 and gold 3. Gold 1 compounds are actually finding application in cancer chemotherapy, whereas gold 3 compounds are being used actually for treatment of certain kind of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. For them, gold compounds are used. So gold compound and silver compounds, they have got medicinal application, right? Then we go to the group 12, that is the zinc, cadmium, mercury. Zinc is essential, very much essential, right? We require a lot of zinc in our body, and now in the COVID period, all of you know from the TV discussions that zinc helps us in boosting our immune system, and zinc is also required for functioning of our nerve system, etc. Right, so zinc is very much required for our body. Cadmium is neither essential nor medicinally very much useful, but mercury has got some mercury compound has got medicinal application. In the classical mercury compound, which all of you probably sometime has used, is mercurochrome, which is used for actually external treatment of cut and wound, etc., etc. Right. Then, if you go to group 13, we have boron, aluminum, gallium, indium, thallium. Here, boron is essential, but it is not essential for human being or many vertebrates. But boron is mainly essential for the plants, right? So boron is essential for the plants, and without boron, most of the plants cannot survive. Aluminum, gallium, indium, thallium, they are not essential, but again, aluminum compounds is very often used for as antacid, aluminum hydroxide as part of gelusil or this kind of digen, etc. This aluminum hydroxide and magnesium hydroxides are there. And gallium compounds, some gallium compounds are again at an being considered for anti-cancer activity, and certain indium isotopes are again the radioactive indium isotopes are useful for radiodiagnostic purposes. Carbon is a bulk essential element. Silicon again is very much essential, right? And tin, again here we may say, though I have marked it as essential because from the slide from the book from which I have taken the slide, it has marked as essential. But normally tin is considered as beneficial rather than essential. So tin should be considered as beneficial. It is marked maybe essential. Normally it is called beneficial. Carbon and silicon are very much essential, and among them carbon is the bulk essential, right? Then if you go to the group 15, we have nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, bismuth. Here we have nitrogen, bulk essential, phosphorus, bulk essential, and other are not essential, but arsenic antimony particularly has got many medicinal application. Uh, you know that certain arsenic compounds are used for medicinal purpose, both in the homeopathy medicine as well as allopathy medicine. And the very early medicine for treatment of syphilis was an arsenic compound called salvarsan. So it was an arsenic compound. And antimony compound, it has got application for the treatment of kalazar. And probably many of you have heard the name of UN Brahmachari, Upendranath Brahmachari, and some of you who may reside in South Calcutta, they may know that there is a road called UN Brahmachari Avenue or UN Brahmachari Road. UN Brahmachari, Upendranath Brahmachari, he prepared a antimony tartarate, organometallic compound of antimony, right? And that compound was the first compound and very effective compound for the treatment of Kala-Azar. Before that, there was not much treatment of Kala-Azar, but UN Brahmachari prepared a organo-antimony compound, which was first compound which was very effective for the treatment of Kala-Azar. And in fact, he was nominated for Nobel Prize, but unfortunately, he was not given the Nobel Prize. Bismuth, again, not much medicinal application also. Then if you go to the group 16, we have oxygen, sulfur, selenium, tellurium, and polonium. Oxygen, without which you cannot survive. So oxygen is a bulk essential element. Sulfur, you know, there are two very essential amino acids in our body called cysteine and methionine, which require sulfur. Selenium is an antioxidant and it is also essential element in our body. And nowadays, more and more research is revealing the role of selenium in our body. It has got very important role in our body for protecting us from the free radicals, etc. Right. And then if we go to the group 17, we have fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. All of them are essential, and among them, chlorine is the bulk essential element, right? But fluorine is also very much essential, particularly for maintaining the dental structure and certain bone structure. Bromine is essential for certain functions in our body and even certain marine organisms. Bromine is very much essential. Iodine, you know, the thyroid gland, which actually requires this iodine. So without iodine, we cannot survive because it is part of the thyroid gland. It is required in the thyroxine hormone, right? So it is a bulk essential element. So based on the periodic table, so you can easily see which elements are essential, which elements are not essential, which elements are useful for medicinal application, etc., etc. And among the lanthanide and actinide elements, none of them are essential or none of them are medicinally has got medicinal application except for gadolinium. We shall see it later. This gadolinium has got gadolinium salts has got tremendous application in your MRI imaging, right? As a contrast agent in the MRI. Very often doctors, when prescribe you for MRI scanning, they will prescribe MRI with contrast agent, and most used contrast agent, 98% cases, they are certain gadolinium compounds. So gadolinium compounds has got medicinal application, but most of the other lanthanides are yet to find any application in the medicinal field also. Now, before going to the next slide, I would like to draw one particular aspect in this slide, and we shall try to explain it later. And that is that if you look at the transition series, this is the first transition series, this is the second transition series, and this is the third transition series. Now, if you look at the transition series, you find that for the first transition series, except scandium and titanium, all elements of the first transition series are essential. So our observation is that for the first transition elements, all the first transition element except scandium and titanium are essential. But if you look at the second and third transition series, you find the second transition series only one element is essential, molybdenum. And in the third transition series, only one element is essential, that is tungsten. So whereas most of the elements of the first transition series are essential, but second and third transition series elements are normally not essential except for two. In the second transition series, we have molybdenum, which is an essential element. And in the third transition series, we have tungsten, which may be an essential element or which was an essential element. But no other element of second and third transition series have found application as essential element, and we shall try to find reason for that. But this is the observation that you must note from this slide. Any question here?
No, sir.
Okay. Then this slide is complicated. You may not require a full part. Only the first part will be sufficient. Role of essential elements. That means what are the essential elements? What roles they play in our body, or how the essential elements are essential in our body. Now, the role of essential elements can be broadly classified under two headings. One is called structural role, the other is called functional role. And the names themselves, to some extent, clarifies the point. Structural role means here the elements, when they function in their role as structural role, they do not participate directly in any physicochemical process, any dynamic process. Rather, they they actually give stability to certain biological structure. So structural role means there is not much dynamic role, not much physicochemical involvement in the of the element or its compound in the functioning of the body, but it is very important because it stabilizes certain biological structure. For instance, here we have written calcium, carbon, oxygen, silicon, fluorine. Right? These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements which mainly find use in the structural role, and to some extent magnesium plays certain structural role. Now let me explain. For instance, calcium, carbon and oxygen, they together form calcium carbonate, and calcium, silicon and oxygen, they form calcium silicate and calcium fluoride. These calcium carbonate and calcium silicate are the major constituent of our skeletal structure. So obviously skeletal structure do not participate in a dynamic process, in the sense it does not participate in any reaction or any physiochemical processes in the body. But definitely without skeleton you cannot survive. So, or without bones you cannot survive. So your skeleton, your bones are made up of calcium, carbon, oxygen, silicon, fluorine. Calcium fluoride stabilizes your dental structure. So here the element is not a particular element which is playing its role in the structural form. It is not participating in any dynamic reaction in a physiochemical process, but rather it is giving stability to certain structure. Now, in certain cases, certain other elements which I have listed here, like say for instance zinc and magnesium, can also play structural role. For instance, magnesium, what happens that all of you are aware that we have our DNA, which is a double helix, right? DNA double helix, all of you know. Can any one of you tell me what is the full form of DNA?
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Deoxyribonucleic, and probably all of you know that in that DNA there are three things. One is certain organic bases called pyridine or pyrimidine bases. There are certain sugar moiety, ribose sugar, and there are certain phosphate moiety, right? So what happens in DNA, in the double helix, we have in the DNA, in the each strand there are phosphate moieties. Now phosphate moieties are negatively charged. So when the double helix when the double helix is formed, then the phosphate moieties of one helix and phosphate moiety of other helix, they will repel each other. And unless and until this repulsion is taken care of, the double helix cannot be stabilized. So what happens that magnesium is inserted in the double helix, so that the positive charge of the magnesium neutralizes, and it actually makes the overall, it is an attractive potential instead of a instead of a repulsive potential. Insertion of magnesium in the double helix causes electrostatic attraction between the phosphate moiety and the magnesium, and that stabilizes the double helix. So magnesium stabilizes the double helical structure. Similarly, some of you, may not be all of you, but some of you may be aware that in proteins we have we have various kind of structure, which is called primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, quaternary structure. Protein folding is very important. If the protein must have proper conformation for its function. Now, sometimes the proper conformation of the proteins are maintained by certain zinc atoms, certain zinc ions, which forms a cross-linking between certain sites to stabilize the quaternary structure of the protein, so that the protein maintains its proper conformation and it can do its function. So structural role means when an element is playing a structural role, it means it is not participating in a physicochemical process, but rather it is stabilizing certain biological structure. This biological structure may be a skeletal structure, it may be a dental structure, it may be a DNA double helical structure, it may be a membrane structure, it may be a protein structure, right? So various biological structure has to be stabilized in its proper form, and there are many elements, many metal ions which plays the structural role. So that is the structural role. When I say functional role, here obviously more dynamic role comes into, more dynamic things comes into play. Functional role means it is participating in certain physiochemical processes, right? So dynamic role means it is participating in either a chemical reaction or a physiochemical process, for instance, maintenance of electrochemical potential gradient, etc., etc., or not signaling, this kind of thing, right? So functional role means it is real physicochemical function and dynamic function. And here again there are, so you see some elements plays dual role: carbon, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, calcium, etc. They play both structural role as well as functional role, and most of the other elements and most of the transitional elements do their functional role. Now for you it will be sufficient to know that essential elements do two types of roles: structural role and functional role, and what are the structural role and what are the functional role. But just a bit of adding more, which may not be required for the exam. What are the functional role? I have listed some possible functional role. You need not understand all of them. But for instance, some functional role may be simply a charge carrier, a NOT signal transduction, etc. So some metal ions like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, they maintain a charge balance in our body. They carry NOT signals, etc., etc. Right. So there are some metal ions which play in our body the Lewis acid base role, like say zinc, magnesium, etc. And there is certain electron transfer reactions in our body, which redox reactions which are carried out by mainly iron and copper. There are certain oxidoreductase reaction, that means electron transfer reaction, which involves either oxygen transfer reaction or a hydrogen transfer reaction. They are either hydrogen addition or oxygen addition, or hydrogen elimination or oxygen elimination. Those are called oxidoreductase reaction. And again, we have iron, copper, and along with it we have molybdenum, vanadium, and manganese, which plays this kind of role. There may be certain small molecule fixation, transport, etc. For instance, oxygen transport, nitrogen fixation, etc. So there we have iron, copper, nickel, and molybdenum. And there may be certain organometallic reaction and isomerization reaction in our body which are catalyzed by cobalt in the form of B12, right? So functional role again has got its variety, but we shall not go into the details. But some different functional roles are given here. It may be a simple charge carrier, it may be a simple Lewis acid base role, it may be a simple electron transfer reaction, it may be a more complicated oxidoreductase reaction, it may be small molecule fixation and transport, like say nitrogen fixation or oxygen storage and transport, or it may be certain isomerization reaction in our body which are carried out by certain cobalt compounds. Next, very important, we have learned a lot about what are the essential elements, right? What are the criteria? What are the essential elements? What are their functions, right? And then what are the clarification factors which determines the essentiality, right? Then question is, naturally, since we are learning from the point of view of chemistry, not biology, so as a chemist, we shall try to understand that what are the factors that out of so many elements that are available in nature, only certain elements, only a handful of elements are selected for functioning in the biological system. So, in other words, what are the methods of biological selection? Why certain elements has been chosen by biological systems as essential, while other elements have not been chosen for biological functioning. Now, again, from our very simple chemical knowledge background, we can list certain criteria for an element to be chosen as an essential element. So, what are the criteria for selection of an element as an essential element that the nature makes this choice? One is obviously I have told you if an element is essential, then that element must be available in that given organism over wide geographical region. That means if I say vanadium is an essential element, then vanadium must be found in, for instance, a human being in India, in West Bengal, in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, and also in USA, South Africa, New Zealand, everywhere. The human beings should have vanadium. That means that element should have abundance over wide geographical region of Earth. Right, and that abundance must be sufficient so that it can be taken for the effective functioning of the body. Right, it should be available in some quantity so that it can play the functional role or it can play the essential element role. So it should be abundant over wide geographical region. This is the first part. That an element, if nature wants to choose an element for it to function as an essential element, it must be available in abundant. At least its relative abundance should be appreciable over wide geographical region of Earth. Second thing is that function and efficiency. That means the physicochemical properties of the element should match the biological demand. That means biological system demands certain function and demands certain function to be done very efficiently. And the element which will be chosen as an essential element, that must be able to do those designated functions with high degree of efficiency. So function and efficiency, function of performing certain biological job with efficiency, that is also a criteria, right? Third criteria is a balance between thermodynamic stability and kinetic reactivity, which is called kinetic lability. This point I shall discuss slightly later, but for the time being, let us accept that when a reaction takes place, in a reaction, when you carry out a reaction, so for instance, A plus B equal to C plus D, you measure two properties of the reaction. One is the equilibrium constant of the reaction, which tells you that if you mix A and B in certain proportion, what percentage of A and B at equilibrium, what percentage of A and B will be converted to C and D, right? Or sometimes we call yield. What will be the yield of C and D? So how much of A and B will be converted to C and D? If an equilibrium constant is high for the reaction, we may say that the product concentration at the equilibrium will be sufficiently high. On the other hand, if thermodynamic stability of the reaction is not very high, we can say that at equilibrium there will not be sufficient quantity of the product. So thermodynamic stability gives you at the end, when the reaction is complete at equilibrium, how much product has been formed. And you require, obviously, in biological system, we require good thermodynamic stability, in the sense we want the product to be formed in sufficient amounts so that efficiency is high. The other important aspect of a reaction is its velocity. Probably some physical chemistry teacher will be already teaching you about the reaction kinetics and reaction velocity. So a reaction may be thermodynamically very much viable, but it may be such a slow reaction that to attain the thermodynamic equilibrium, it requires a lot of time, right? It requires a lot of time. So That means the reaction is quite slow, both forward reaction and the backward reaction are slow, so that the attainment of equilibrium requires much time. In that case, though at equilibrium you will have high percentage of your product, but since the reaction is very slow, your overall process become inefficient because biological process cannot be slow. It has to be quite efficient and quite fast. So we require good stability and good kinetic kinetic reactivity, but there should be a balance between them. Why we require a balance between stability and lability, that I shall discuss slightly later, maybe in the next class or maybe at the end of this class. Now, uh, one example I shall give you where a reaction is very much thermodynamically favorable, but reaction is quite slow, is the famous reaction of the hydrogen and oxygen, reaction of hydrogen and oxygen to form water. Now, if you measure the stability constant or thermodynamic free energy related, Gibbs free energy released, when two hydrogen atoms or two hydrogen molecules react with one oxygen molecule to form two molecules of water, that reaction has got enormous thermodynamic potential. It has got enormous stability in the sense the product is highly stabilized with respect to reactant. So stability constant or the equilibrium constant for the reaction is very high. That means thermodynamically this reaction is highly allowed. But as such, the reaction rate is so slow that if you mix hydrogen and oxygen and keep it for hundreds of years, thousands of years, very small amount of water will be formed. If you are not intervening, uh, either by way of putting certain catalysts like platinum there, or by providing certain energy like say either in the form of heat or in the form of a electric spark, until you initiate the reaction, right? The reaction will be very slow. So you have to kickstart the reaction and then the reaction will start. Right? It's some kind of a nuclear fusion reaction. First of all, you have to start the reaction and then it will be self-sustaining. So similarly here also, some reactions may be thermodynamically very favorable, but kinetically it may be so slow that the reaction do not go to completion in a long period of time, and as a result of this, those reactions has to be catalyzed or has to be made faster by certain external intervention. The third thing is about, again, evolution. Evolution is ability to improve specificity and selectivity. And this is proved by the fact that initially there were only 11 elements that were essential, but as the evolution took place, with the evolution, with time, more and more elements has been chosen as essential to perform newer functions with the old functions with more efficiency and selectivity. So previously there were 11 elements which are essential, but during evolution it has been found by the biological system that some more elements will be more useful, and so they are now using around 25 elements for as an essential element. So with evolution, the nature of the elements may change. And again, one example is for instance replacement of tungsten by molybdenum. I am repeatedly telling you that many early bacteria use tungsten as an essential element, but now tungsten has been almost 100% replaced by molybdenum. So because it has been found by nature that molybdenum can do those functions of tungsten with much more specificity and selectivity, and that's why tungsten has been replaced by molybdenum. And, and the last criteria is that if nature finds that it requires certain element or more than one element for doing multiple function in the body, then it will spend enormous resources. That biological system will spend enormous resources for handling that particular element, but in return the biological system will demand that it will get multiple functionality from that element. So if an element is found to be difficult to handle in the biological system, then that element will be taken as an essential element provided it can do multiple functionality. Now, again, I shall explain later with the help of iron. Iron is an element. Apparently, it seems very simple element, but from your school chemistry knowledge that iron above pH 3 should start precipitating as ferric hydroxide. So ferric iron, particularly in the ferric form, it has got tremendous tendency to form precipitate of ferric hydroxide. That means solubility of iron above pH 3 is very low. Now biological pH is pH 7. Right, biological pH 7, around pH 7 to 7.2 is a biological pH. So from your knowledge of chemistry, if I give you that the solubility product of ferric hydroxide is 10 to the power minus 34, you can easily calculate what will be the solubility of iron at pH 3, ferric iron, and it will very low, say 10 to the power minus 10, 10 to the power minus 12 molar, right, or even less than that. So that means iron is a difficult element to handle because at biological pH iron is not soluble. So if you want to handle iron in biological system, you have to devise special systems, special mechanism to stabilize iron in the biological pH. But in exchange for nature has devised that particular system to handle iron in biology. But in return, what nature has obtained that nature has got multiple functionality for iron. There is no other element in biology which can do so many different biological functions as iron can do. And in this connection, I very often give an example of a smartphone and the old kind of phones. So when you have old mobiles, with that you can only do, because they cost much less, right? Their cost is much less, but with that you have only two functionalities. Or you can phone, you can talk, and you can SMS. You can do certain SMS message. You can send message, but it cannot do so many other things. Now, when you are using a smartphone, obviously it costs much. So you are investing much more to buy a smartphone. But why you are investing in the smartphone? Because it has got multiple functionality. With the smartphone, you can do so many things. You can explore so many other things, right? So when someone like us, when nature also invests some more resources for a given element, in turn it demands that from that element it will get back multiple functionality. So if an element is difficult to handle, then biological system may devise special mechanism for handling that element, but in return that element should show multiple functionality. So these are some of the criteria for for the choice of an element as an essential element by nature. Before proceeding further, I shall give you a book, right? So uh, you can go to any standard inorganic chemistry book, and there is a chapter on bioinorganic chemistry in that. But I may suggest one or two books, but it may not be the only book, right? So it is A.K. Das, Bioinorganic Chemistry, and there is one book by R.P. Sarkar, a two-volume book of inorganic chemistry, which contains a chapter of bioinorganic chemistry. But you may also consider other books. But I will tell you that to concentrate on the class lecture, class note, and try to make your own notes from the class lectures and follow that, because the slides which I have prepared, obviously it has been prepared from many resources. So from one book you may not get one thing, but if you want a standard textbook, this will be the best, I think, A.K. Das Bioinorganic Chemistry. But you can also consider R.P. Sarkar's Inorganic Chemistry or any standard chemistry book. inorganic chemistry book, which has got a chapter on bioinorganic chemistry. Now, I just almost time is up, so I will just elaborate that point why we need a balance between stability and lability. Now, suppose we have an enzyme, it contains metal ion, right? Metal enzyme, and it reacts with a substrate, so it forms an enzyme substrate complex. Then enzyme converts that substrate to product, and then product is dissociated to E plus P. That means enzyme plus product. Product goes away, and enzyme again comes back for the reaction. Next cycle of reaction. Now, what happens if the stability is not very high? Then enzyme plus substrate reaction, we require enzyme to be fully engaged. Now, if the stability is high, then almost all the enzyme will be converted to enzyme substrate, so there is no unreacted enzyme. So your enzyme is functioning efficiently. On the other hand, if stability is too low, then in the equilibrium there will be sufficient unreacted enzyme. That means that enzyme is not participating in the reaction. That means the efficiency is lost. So you require by stability, thermodynamic stability. Now, question is, what happens if stability is too high? Then you see enzyme substrate complex, then the enzyme converts the substrate to the product. Now, if the stability is too high, then this enzyme product complex must dissociate to enzyme plus product. Now, if the stability is too high, then the enzyme product complex will not dissociate to enzyme plus P, because the enzyme has got very high binding. And so if the binding constant is too high, then the product will not be dissociated. And if product is not dissociated, then the enzyme would not be free to carry out another cycle of reaction. So just as your parents will tell you that too much of anything is not good, so here also stability is good, it requires stability, but excess stability is harmful, because excess stability will lead to the dissociation of the product will be inhibited. Similarly, we require the reaction velocity to be fast, because enzyme plus substrate rapidly should be converted to enzyme substrate complex, and that should be rapidly converted to product. So this cycle should run fast. But if the reaction is too fast, what will happen? When a reaction is fast, both forward reaction and backward reaction are fast. So if the kinetics is too fast, then before the enzyme substrate complex is converted to enzyme product, some substrate may dissociate. If the reaction kinetics, reaction velocity is too fast, then backward reaction will be also quite fast, and as a result of this, before the substrate is converted to product, it may dissociate away from the enzyme. So we require a balance, we require a balanced stability, and we require a balanced lability or kinetic velocity. So we require a balance between stability and lability. And I have told you that the second and third row transition elements are not suitable. First transition elements are very much essential. Why? Two reasons are there, we can say. First of all, first transition elements are more abundant than second and third transition elements. So in terms of abundance, first transition elements wins the war. And second thing is that first transition elements has got a good balance between stability and lability. On the other hand, for second and third row transition elements, their stability is quite high and reaction velocity is quite low. So they have too much high stability, too low reaction velocity or lability. And so in terms of abundance as well as in terms of balance between stability and lability, the first row elements actually wins hands down compared to second and third row elements. And that's why in biology, first row transition elements are essential elements, but second and third row transition elements are very rarely essential elements. So I will end my lecture here. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.